From the nation's capital, Eye on Washington with Marilee Joyce. A weekly discussion about the federal issues most important to Nevada. And now, from Washington, D.C., here's Marilee Joyce.
Well, good day to you. I'm Marilee Joyce, and this is Eye on Washington, the only statewide Nevada news program produced in Washington, D.C. Every week, Eye on Washington takes you straight to Capitol Hill for a discussion with Nevada's delegation and other leaders about the federal matters that matter to you. Today's topic, pain at the pump. We'll tell you one Nevada U.S. Congressman's thoughts on rising gas prices and why he believes the higher the gas, the lower the job creation. And he is my guest today, of course, Nevada U.S. Congressman Mark Amodei. And thanks for being here again.
Thanks for the invite, Marilee.
Appreciate it. Well, he says that unless leaders in Washington truly embrace that all-of-the-above energy policy, gas costs will rise and employment opportunities will fall. And today on Eye on Washington, we'll find out how my guest defines a sound energy policy. We'll tell you his theory on the gas price employment connection, and we'll tell you why folks in rural communities, folks especially important to the congressperson whose district includes rural areas, are hit particularly hard when gas costs go up. Now, as we tape this program, the average price for a gallon of gas in Nevada has risen 22 cents in just 2 weeks. Nationally, as we tape this program, it's jumped 45 cents just since January 1st and is the highest on record for this time of year, according to the Associated Press, an average of $3.73 a gallon. Many economists have been saying that so far they don't think rising gas prices will go high enough to derail the economy, but apparently $4.11 is the magical psychological number where people start fretting. That according to a USA Today piece saying experts believe that if gas exceeds the all-time high of $4.11, Americans will think twice about that trip to the local restaurant, not to mention longer excursions. And if gas goes to $4.50 a gallon and stays there, the piece continues, it would cost each household about $1,000 more this year than it did last year for the same amount of gas. And Congressman, we're going to get to your thoughts on both the long-term and the short-term ways to lower and stabilize prices. But I want to talk about this first. What do you, the rising gas prices, what effect, when you go home and visit with your constituents, what are you hearing from these people who are already struggling about rising gas prices and its effect on them?
Well, first of all, Marilee, it affects everybody, not just if you drive, but basically our whole supply chain for supplying our stores, shipping our goods, all those things are gasoline and diesel. No disrespect to the railroad folks, but once you get to Reno or once you get to Las Vegas, the railroad thing is over as far as distribution goes. Not that they don't have it going through Elko and all those other things, but we basically distribute over the highways. So it affects the cost of everything on the shelf that you buy, all of those sorts of things. And when people look at that in these times of the economy still awful, and you say, listen, it's going to cost you more to get to work, to go buy the necessities of life, it's insidious.
You know, all of that is true, and I want to get to your thoughts on an overall policy in our next segment. But as far as the gas prices, some say that rural areas can be especially hit when prices go up. Partly, there's much less competition among stations. Or there's just what are you hearing from?
Well, you don't have as many outlets. You also have more dependence on being able to drive to everything that you do in terms of healthcare in much of rural or frontier Nevada involves a trip to one of the urban areas, whether it's Salt Lake, whether it's Reno, whether it's Las Vegas. So anything you think about doing involves using energy to get around in your personal vehicle.
You know, much of this is psychological. Yeah, I mentioned that 411. The economists call that kind of that magic point. And didn't gas prices also peak just before the 2008?
That was the time frame. I'll tell you, talking to Kevin McCarthy, who's the majority whip, just the other day, indicated that he had some friends that went to Death Valley, just over the line from Nevada. Well, it's already over $6 a gallon. So you want to talk about, you know, psychological impact. I remember Dean Heller saying several years ago, when he was speaking to a group, can you imagine gas at $5 a gallon? Well, you know what? It retreated from there. And now we're marching towards that again, and there's a huge psychological
When you go
impact.
home, though, are your constituents fretting that history will repeat itself?
Well, we're going to find out, since we're going to be all next week at home. So we'll get some, I would imagine, and it's going to be all around the state, so I imagine we'll get some direct input.
Speaking of costs in general that have risen, not to take us away from the gas prices for a moment, costs last year were sharply up for so much. Bread, milk, meat, higher prices for grain and other farm subsidies. Now your constituents have higher gas prices in addition.
And not only that, Marilee, but those higher energy prices in the form of gas also impact those groceries in terms of the production, the delivery, all of those sorts of necessities of life. So there's no hiding from it.
This is a big what if something were to break out between Israel and Iran and Israel, leading to a blocked access to the Gulf, and oil would be like, what, $150 a barrel, and we don't have a shocker like that. But, what would that mean as far as the gas prices?
Well, you know what, Marilee, if there was ever a time to get serious about energy independence, you would think it would be now. For all of the things that go into that and the other markets emerging in China and India, it's time to quit the politics and start the policy.
Speaking of that, what a great transition since we're out of time on this segment. Let's find out what his ideas for a sound energy policy are right after this.
You're watching Eye on Washington with Marilee Joyce. Brought to you by the National Mining Association, Caesars Entertainment, the Frias Companies, NV Energy, the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, the Nevada Mining Association, Western Lithium Corporation, and Skyline Restaurant and Casino.
America's minerals have made us a nation of self-reliant dreamers, shaping our world and the endless ways we enjoy it. But red tape often forces us to import more than half the minerals we depend on. Minerals we already have. We don't import our dreams. Shouldn't that go for our minerals too? The National Mining Association. Learn more at nma.org.
You already watch Eye on Washington with Marilee Joyce, Nevada's only statewide program produced in Washington, D.C. But for even more news from Capitol Hill that affects you, your family, and your business, you need to read Nevada's Washington Watch, our online newsletter. In-depth reporting on federal efforts that impact you. Our exclusive Inside the Beltway column, putting a microscope on Nevada's congressional delegation. Guest editorials about what Nevada needs from the Hill. Nevada's Washington Watch, your watch on Washington. Subscribe today at nevadaswashingtonwatch.com.
Heads we go, tails we stay. A coin flip. That's how it all began for what is now Nevada's largest transportation provider. Charlie Frias, with a can-do spirit and support of his loving wife Phyllis, bought ABC Union Cab in 1966. They then parlayed 5 cabs into a fleet of nearly 1,000. And today, Frias has over 2,000 employees and was recently voted Las Vegas's best company to work for. Frias, safe, reliable, simply the best.
Hey, it's embarrassing to be tackled by someone smaller than me. I look weak and effeminate, so now I'm overcompensating.
I'd also be very ashamed by that. I'm not waiting until it happens to me to make you feel small.
My dad taught me to be the alpha male, so now I'm gonna knock a tray out of your hands at lunch.
Kids bully for all kinds of reasons. None of them are good. Know your kids' friends and monitor their social networking. Find more tips at flipthescriptnow.org.
And welcome back to Eye on Washington, our discussion of rising gas prices and what this new economic woe means to already struggling Nevadans and what should be done to stabilize them. We've been visiting with Nevada U.S. Congressman Mark Amodei. In the days before he and I sat down to discuss all this, my guest, the congressman, had a piece published in the popular Washington publication, The Hill, titled "Big Squeeze at the Pump Hurts Middle Class." It focused largely on his idea that some policies that he says lead to higher prices also stymie job creation. The congressman writes that a number of factors that contribute to costlier gas are beyond the reach of government, things like global demand and Persian Gulf instability, but he says there are variables the federal government does control when it comes to energy policy. And he expresses concern that what he calls negative attitudes toward the development of natural resources, quote, do real harm to middle and working class communities. That's because, he continues, decisions like blocking construction of the controversial Keystone pipeline meant the cancellation of 20,000 jobs, as well as the loss of 510,000 barrels of oil daily from Canada. He adds this is not an isolated case, as there have been canceled oil and natural gas leases on federal lands, closed offshore areas to development, and impeded development of oil shale, and that's all in recent years. He writes, quote, such actions not only perpetuate American dependence on expensive foreign oil from hostile regions, they deprive American families and small businesses of jobs and growth generated by the development of our natural resources. I want to start off this round of discussion with this. We're talking here about your concerns with a lack of domestic development, its impact not only on foreign oil reliance and jobs. Before we get into all this, I do want to give you a chance to say you have mentioned you are a fan of exploring some alternative sources of energy. You're a fan of Nevada's offerings there as far as wind, solar, geothermal, and everything else. So.
Well, you know, Marilee, I think it's possible to be responsible on the issue of energy by saying all aspects have a role to play, and that includes renewables, or what some people call green. But I think where we leave the road of reason and practicality is when you say it just must be.
Or that it's a short-term solution instead of.
You know what? I don't think,
yeah.
You know, we've done the short-term stuff
sure.
long enough. So I just think everything ought to be on the table. Maybe it doesn't fit in every instance, but it ought to all be evaluated on some objective basis instead of one with an idea that we're going to stop this type and promote this type. They ought to all compete on a level field.
Your piece makes very clear your thought that stopping, for instance, the pipeline. That's 510,000 barrels of oil. That is many jobs, etc. And you've tied it together in your piece and other statements you've made of the connection between the development of these natural resources and job creation.
Yep.
Tell us a little more about that.
Well, listen, fossil fuels have a role to play. I'm sorry, I sincerely believe that. I think you can search for and utilize and develop fossil fuel sources in an environmentally responsible manner.
Sure.
Always? No, not always, but in most instances, it's like let it go on its facts. Keystone is a primary example. The environmental concerns were met, and this has become a symbol, not something that should be evaluated on, do we want to be trading with Canada instead of folks thousands of miles away? Do we want to create jobs in this country? Do we want to provide a stable source of that sort of fossil fuel as it's part of the mix? And so when you don't do all those things, you have people that are thousands of miles away in areas that are high threat, unpredictable, and by the way, the impacts that we discussed earlier on the economy in terms of the cost of getting goods to market, the cost for people to go about their daily business, the cost to people to access medical care in a state like Nevada, which is very diverse in a geographic sense, all those things make no sense for Nevada.
You know, you mentioned in your the piece in the Hill publication that anyone can look up, the House has passed bipartisan legislation to expand energy production in order to stabilize energy prices and create those jobs you've talked about. Where does this bill stand?
Actually, I think Keystone Pipeline is something that could end up coming back here again and again. The first couple times we tried it, Marilee, there's no, well, actually, the bill did pass. The president, in the last version of it, said, no, I'm not going to do it. So now we're starting the next generation, which is, thank you for your input, Mr. President. We're going to try to make it the law of the land without you.
You serve on the House Natural Resources Committee. Remind our audience, we've talked about it on previous shows, remind our audience of what that committee does and how it kind of plays a role in all of this.
Well, first of all, I'm blessed to have gotten the slot. Rob Fleischman from Tennessee stepped aside when I was elected to let me on because the state is 85%-ish owned by the federal government. I'm on the Public Lands and Parks Subcommittee, which handles all land bills, and then the Energy and Minerals Subcommittee, which deals with what we're talking about here in terms of offshore drilling, exploration issues, utilization of natural resources in a responsible manner in the energy and minerals context. So, and
specifically on the energy part of the committee, tell me your role there as far as maybe legislation you would bring up or discussions going on as far as the gas prices and energy policy.
We've recently heard bills that talk about energy exploration offshore, onshore, shale production, the fracking practices, Keystone Pipeline, So pretty much the whole gamut, as well as the renewables, as well, land use policies that affect renewables, geothermal, solar, wind, all those things.
Sounds like Nevada needs a seat there, and we've got it.
You know what? I'm just again. I know I'm very grateful to have gotten the seat. It's been a key part of my arriving here.
When Eye on Washington returns, we're going to shift gears now and tell you a little update on unemployment and the housing crisis. Two more issues you in Nevada care a lot about. That's right after this.
Every day, thousands of people in northern Nevada don't get enough to eat. 1 out of 5 children in northern Nevada go to bed hungry every night. But you can do something about it. Catholic Community Services of Northern Nevada has been providing help and creating hope in our community for more than 65 years. By donating food, time, or money, you can make a difference in a hungry person's life. When you make your generous donation to St. Vincent's Dining Room and St. Vincent's Food Pantry, you're helping to fight the scourge of hunger in northern Nevada. In these tough economic times, now more than ever, we need to help those less fortunate. To find out how you can donate to St. Vincent's Dining Room and St. Vincent's Food Pantry, call, click, or stop by, and together we can end hunger in northern Nevada.
Thanks to an ongoing commitment by America's mining companies, more than 2 million acres already have been reclaimed. To learn more about reclamation or other aspects of mining, visit nma.org, the National Mining Association.
You already watch Eye on Washington with Marilee Joyce, Nevada's only statewide program produced in Washington, D.C. But for even more news from Capitol Hill that affects you, your family, and your business, you need to read Nevada's Washington Watch, our online newsletter. In-depth reporting on federal efforts that impact you. Our exclusive Inside the Beltway column, putting a microscope on Nevada's congressional delegation. Guest editorials about what Nevada needs from the Hill. Nevada's Washington Watch, your watch on Washington. Subscribe today at nevadaswashingtonwatch.com.
Heads we go, tails we stay. A coin flip. That's how it all began for what is now Nevada's largest transportation provider. Charlie Frias, with a can-do spirit and support of his loving wife Phyllis, bought ABC Union Cab in 1966. They then parlayed 5 cabs into a fleet of nearly 1,000. And today, Frias has over 2,000 employees and was recently voted Las Vegas's best company to work for. Frias, safe, reliable, simply the best.
How will new energy technology make our lives better? Will geothermal, wind, and solar energy be a bigger part of our future? Yes. And soon it will all be in our backyard. Learn more at nvenergy.com.
And welcome back to Eye on Washington, our discussion of gas prices and now some more economic issues that are important to you in Nevada. We've been visiting with Nevada U.S. Congressman Mark Amodei. Well, we're going to shift gears now and broaden our discussion to 2 other economic issues you all care greatly about, and that's unemployment and the continuing housing crisis in Nevada. According to a recent report from CNN Money, a service of CNN and Money and Fortune magazines, Nevada's unemployment rate is 12.6% versus 8.5% nationally. Foreclosure filings are hitting 1 in 16 homes in the state. Nationally, 1 in 69 homes underwater. Nevada, 58%, but just over 22% nationally. And economists I've read say it'll be tough to see any true relief in Nevada's housing market without true improvements in the job market. Now, recently, my guest, the congressman, voted to extend the pay freeze on members of Congress for another year, deciding it's tough to accept a raise when so many of those he serves are out of work and losing homes. After the vote, he told the press, quote, "Americans and Nevadans have had to tighten their belts. The federal government better do the same." We'll ask him about this and bills he has or is supporting, but very quickly, here is just a bit of what the congressman says on the jobs and the economy page of his website regarding what he thinks needs to happen on the Hill right now to help you. Quote, More taxation, regulation, and litigation will not create more jobs. We need common sense pro-growth policies to give small businesses and entrepreneurs renewed confidence in our economy and to remove Washington as the roadblock to job creation. Congressman, I won't even pose a question. I'll just let you continue on that theme.
Thanks, Marilee. Well, I mean, I'm a guy who believes that most solutions are in the private sector. And so when people say, what can Washington do? It's like, what can Washington actually get out of the business of doing that helps that private sector grow and thrive? And I couldn't agree more with your quote with the economist. Jobs and housing, all that is connected in Nevada. And so while different programs have been tried, and I'm not saying we should stop, the bottom line is until you do something to start revving up the economy on the private side again that creates those jobs so people can once again create that demand, then you know what, it's going to continue to go. We have to grow the economy to make those problems go away.
You know, you mentioned on your site that the House has passed nearly 30 bipartisan jobs bills. Are you able to name one or two that in your estimation would particularly help out-of-work Nevadans? Well,
I'll tell you, we have done several that talk about the whole energy policy, which, you know, Nevada, when we compete for economic development, Marilee, is a state that quite frankly, our power rates are higher than we'd like them to be. Next door in Utah, across the line, guess what? Power rates are substantially lower. You know why? 96% coal generated. Now, I'm not saying we should achieve 96%, but that's one of the areas where there were jobs there. It had an impact on recruiting companies. So we're out there trying to promote with those pieces of legislation the fact that it is possible to use clean coal. So that's one of the ones that we've done to promote it. Regulations, the RAINS Act, which talked about federal regulations, is one where we tried to rein in that burden that places on small businesses. Sure. Didn't get a hearing on the other side. You know,
you've said in many ways, and you said it again a few moments ago, that one key way to help the ailing economy is to encourage entrepreneurship. And if I can be just selfish for a moment here, as a very tiny small business owner myself, I'm curious about your thoughts regarding both the federal government's role here and the best way to help small businesses, folks like me who are struggling in this rough economy.
Well, you know, it's a combination of things. One, if you have a regulatory framework that takes a large portion of your resources and your time to devote to meet while you're not doing whatever your small business is, then that's insidious and that discourages people from doing that. That also takes money away that could be going to hire people, that could be going to expand your product lines, all those sorts of things. Another one is an energy policy. Energy affects everything. In this studio, we're using energy. So you've got energy policy, you've got regulations. Federal government's banking regulations, Marilee, are ones where they're saying banks aren't loaning to people. Well, part of the reason they're not is because they don't know what the rules are from week to week. So what are they doing? They're doing like a lot of people are, and that is they're hunkering down, they're holding on to their resources because they don't want to be in violation. Now the banks, I'm not the protector of the banks, but you know what? Credit is phenomenally tight, and part of that is because the regulatory framework is phenomenally unpredictable right now.
You know, we're running out of time for this segment. I do want to ask you one thing. As we look ahead at the rest of the year, are you optimistic that Washington will really pass some legislation that will help struggling Nevadans?
I'm optimistic that the House is going to.
We'll leave it at that. We're going to be right back with our mailbag segment. That's right after this.
All of us at Caesars Entertainment have something we want to say.
Play responsibly.
Play responsibly. We don't want you to gamble if you've had too much to drink.
You shouldn't gamble if you're lonely or depressed.
And if you're under 21, you're not allowed to play.
No, no, no.
No matter which of our casinos you come to, our message is always the same.
Play responsibly.
Play responsibly.
Play responsibly. We know you're coming to our casinos to have a good time, and we always want you to leave feeling like you did.
America's minerals have made us a nation of self-reliant dreamers, shaping our world and the endless ways we enjoy it. But red tape often forces us to import more than half the minerals we depend on. Minerals we already have. We don't import our dreams. Shouldn't that go for our minerals too? The National Mining Association. Learn more at nma.org.
The average text takes your eyes off the road for nearly 5 seconds.
Built on a fleet of just 5 cabs bought in 1966 by founder Charlie Frias, Frias Transportation is now Nevada's largest transportation provider. Today, Frias has a fleet of nearly 1,000 vehicles and more than 2,000 employees. As an industry and community leader, Frias continues to create the future of transportation technology and management and actively supports the community, continuing the legacy of quality service in the Las Vegas Valley. Simply the best. Thanks to an ongoing commitment by America's mining companies, more than 2 million acres already have been reclaimed. To learn more about reclamation or other aspects of mining, visit nma.org, the National Mining Association.
And we're back with our closing segment of today's Eye on Washington. It is our mailbag segment. In this segment, we tell you about an issue the congressional mailbag page of Joyce Communications' website has been getting a lot of correspondence about. We read one of your letters on the air, and then we invite our guests to respond to you right here. And Congressman, your office has been hearing a lot lately about public land swaps. I think we do shows on it. We have articles, and people are more and more curious. I have a letter here from Josie L. of Searchlight, and she says, Dear Congressman Amodei, could you explain how the transfer of public land to a college will help improve Nevada? What do you say to Josie?
Well, Josie, in a couple of ways. First and foremost, it can create revenue for that college that does not have to come out of the taxation stream at the state or the federal level to allow them to perform a mission, which one of those is to supply folks for a workforce that then creates that synergy in terms of whether it's technical education, vocational education, or the traditional academic things with those degrees to where you then, those folks go in the workforce. A lot of companies, Josie, look at the availability of higher education, the cost, and what they're producing in higher education that matches their potential location in our state. Mm-hmm. So it is very much a part of economic development in terms of our attractiveness to companies that we want to relocate here and provide jobs and build the economy.
We, as I said, we've talked about land swaps on this show a lot, and you read a lot about it in Nevada. It seems that people are hearing good news about what this means to the state economically, and we're hearing a lot of more questions like this.
You know, the underlying thing, real briefly, Marilee, is this, is the more property that you get into private ownership responsibly, that helps generate that economy as opposed to not being on the tax roll.
Well, I think Josie's got, you've got Josie's back on that. Thanks for being here today on all these employment, job, and energy matters, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
Good to see you.
That does wrap up this week's Eye on Washington. Be sure to join us next time as we discuss more important federal matters and their impact on you in Nevada. Be sure to like Eye on Washington on Facebook and read our Nevada's Washington Watch newsletter for the very latest from Capitol Hill that matters most to you. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Marilee Joyce in Washington. Good day.